It is available online also. And some of the articles of Reporters Collective we have printed in the book which we released today also. Okay. So we will start with Nithin, and then followed by that Taraji, and then our political leaders will be speaking. So let's start. Thank you. Hello, Nitinji, you can speak. Can you hear me? Put his video on. Please keep your video on and speak. Hello. Please speak.
Hello. Hi. My name is Nithin Sethi. I'm the founding editor at the Reporters Collective. I apologize to the gathering and to the host for not being able to make it physically to the venue. I'm caught up in Imphal in Manipur with some personal emergency. And but I would like to take this opportunity to talk about a few things relating to our electoral democracy that we've investigated in the past and found very disturbing. Our work some years ago started by looking at the electoral bonds process itself, which uh, unearthed a plethora of evidence of how the party in power had manipulated the government systems to generate a secret source of funding for itself, which put all opposition's party at great disadvantage, created a funnel of what became a legalized form of crony capitalism. It took, unfortunately, even the Supreme Court many years after we had produced the evidence to come forth and agree that that route was unconstitutional. Even in doing so, the Supreme Court did not eventually ask for disgorgement of the thousands of crores that political parties had earned through this dubious, questionable, and illegal route. Our work was able to show that there was strong correlation between those who quietly funded the parties in power and the work and the contracts that they got from state or state related agencies in and around that period. Uh, this is a classic form of crony capitalism, which had been institutionalized, legalized, and given a cover, which was eventually blown over. But the end of the electoral bonds itself did not end the nature of crony capitalism that we have and the consequences that has for electoral processes in India. Our work over years has continued to show that there's a greater degree of concentration of resources in the hand of the party in power, BJP input is what I mean. That even within BJP, there's a centralization of the funding processes that is happening. And that is impacting the nature of democracy at large within the party, but more importantly, within the country. Coupled with this, another process which is ticked off which has to us caused great worry, and we've investigated at depth for the last 3 months, is the functionings of the Election Commission of India, particularly with the focus of what it has called the special intensive revision of the electoral rolls of the country, starting with Bihar. The process, as we investigated and unearthed, was unprecedented, was ambiguous, did not have any set protocols, and gave great discretion to those in power and those in the election commission to do what they pleased as they pleased without any transparency towards the citizens. Over 3 months, we looked at what was happening in the SIR process in Bihar, and what we found was appalling. In the last finalized list of Bihar voters, we found more than 15 lakh suspect duplicates, people holding more than two voter ID cards, sometimes going as far as 16, 17 voter ID cards with the same name, same relative names, nearly the same ages, sometimes the same addresses, sometimes different addresses. What we found was it was possible for the election commission to have removed these duplicates using the same method that we had to identify them, but the election commission had not followed a standard protocol that it used to do till then in removing the duplicates. We found voters from Uttar Pradesh registered in Bihar. We found more than a crore voters who earlier had been registered at proper addresses, now being registered often on bulk addresses with more than 600, 800 people of different caste, families, and communities being clubbed together at fictitious addresses. And these were not the notional address process that the election commission does have in place for people who do not have registered numbers for their homes. These were fictitious addresses. And this was the result of what was clearly claimed by the election commission to be a process that would be puritanical, purifying the voter list. During this process, we caught in one constituency an attempt that we were shocked by a two-time BJP MLA to disenfranchise and remove the name of more than 80,000 Muslim voters from his constituency. We have heard of cases before where parties make attempt to delete what they think are going to be voters of the opposition or add names of voters who they think will vote for them. Our experience shows this has been done at the scale of 1,000 to 2,000 votes per constituency. But what happened in Bihar in this one constituency was unprecedented. 80,000 voters being attempted to be deleted. It was nipped in the bud because we caught it in time. We made the news public, and consequently, the election commission had to reject that. The process that election commission has set in place, and now it promises to unfold this across the country, has set up standards of opaqueness which have never existed before. It's taken decades for the election commission to create a degree of credibility about Indian electoral democracy, and that's been eroded in just 3 months. It's not just the manner in which it has conducted this exercise called SIR, but it's also the arrogance with which it is conducted. It's clarity that it is not answerable to the citizens of India. It is not the custodian of Indian elections, but as if it's the owner of Indian elections. Puts a very dark cloud over our heads for two reasons. And I say this with great responsibility and seriousness. One, diminishes our trust in the electoral process, which is not good. It is the most debilitating for a poor and marginal who really go out and vote the most to make sure our democracy functions as good as it can under the circumstances. It is destroying trust in the minds of voters about what is happening. Two, It is raising serious doubts, which, at least in my professional life in the last 20 years, I'd seen diminishing, of the nature of what happens in this election, the scale to which it can be manipulated, and whether the previous methods that already existed to manipulate have now been scaled up using technology, something that was not possible perhaps 10 to 15 years ago. In the face of this onslaught on the electoral process, the absolute arrogance of the Election Commission to keep quiet, to not be answerable, to not provide responses. We asked for information from the Election Commission under RTI to show us what process it had gone through to think why the SIR was necessary, who it had confabulated with, which part of the government it had consulted with. Both the government and the Election Commission have refused to share information on that. As custodians, the Election Commission is essentially answerable to the citizens under the Constitution. It is obviously not answerable to the government, but something perverse seems to have happened in the last some months. The Election Commission seems to have abrogated to itself powers which deny citizens any answerability from it. It seems very often to align, or at least at times to align, with interests and ideas that favor the government. And it sits quiet when it should be acting upon things that would perhaps hurt the party in power. I must say that some of the things that we've noticed in the last 3 to 6 months of investigations, and including earlier years over the electoral bonds process itself, some of these problems and anomalies and challenges of electoral democracy and voting processes have existed for a fair while. They're not new. But those challenges have deepened. The risks to electoral democracy have risen. This is going to take a difficult while to undo, even if the Election Commission at some day realizes what it is doing is harmful to Indian democracy. Credibility built over decades can be lost in a day, but to regain it takes even longer. And I think that's the brink at which we stand. We've shown how digitally voters' lists can be manipulated remotely and physically. We have shown how election commission's processes now are so weak that they cannot monitor, or perhaps sometimes they look over the changes and the problems that are occurring in these voter lists. To me, there is now hard evidence that the Election Commission should have stood up and become more answerable and not less. There is hard and strong material evidence that there is a deep potential of micromanagement of voter lists at scales and by methods that were not possible before. I would urge all my friends here to take a look at our work. But more than that, I would urge all the friends to think very carefully about how we as public can become a watchdog over these institutions if they refuse to be answerable to citizens, because that is the need of the hour. I'll pause here and I'll thank again everyone who's heard this. I'll apologize to the hosts for not being able to make it despite promising to do so. And a good luck to everyone at the conference. Thank you so much.